Tonight's topic is called Secrets of Redemption. It's a class on Mashiach. In fact, I'm going to be starting a new series at the Kollel after Pesach, May 7th, if you would come. It's going to be called Discovery in the Depth of Redemption. It's going to be all about Mashiach, based on different Kabbalistic literature, and mostly on the cover of the book. I have it in front of me. It's an old book. I don't think it's printed. But it's called My Law. It's a book on what happens in the Mashiach. So it's a fascinating book. So tonight's class is a general outlook on it. I'm just going to speak on it's a lot of information, but I would like to just give an introduction of some sort to the series that I'm going to start, and I think it's something we can all take a lesson from. But what we do every week, people come and speak at Amunah, we give different aspects to what Amunah is. So we all know that Maimonides has the 13 principles of what the foundation of Judaism is. It's all about Amunah. And one of them, and we say, is Ani Ma'amin B'Amunah Shalem, I believe, the V'yas HaMashiach, that when Mashiach will come, even though it prolonged, it didn't come yet, even though still I wait for it every day. Every day I clench for it to come. Every day. There's a joke that Mashiach, came and everyone came out to greet the Mashiach, and this one guy Chaim, he's like not coming out of his house, and they're waiting, and they sent people to his house, and they said Mashiach's not waiting for you. The only guy left. He said, okay, I'm coming. 5 minutes goes by, still he's not coming. 10 minutes goes by, still. Finally, it's the Mashiach says, I'll come. I'll go down. So Mashiach comes to the house. He says, Nuchaim, we're waiting for you. He says, listen, buddy, I've been waiting for you for thousands of years, and you've been waiting for me for 10 minutes. But in a serious note, throughout the generations, Jews have carried these words in good times and bad. We all know the horrific stories as the Jews marched to their deaths, whether it was the death marches or the gas chambers in Auschwitz and Bergen-Belsen and Dachau. Our grandparents sang these songs, sang these words as they entered from darkness into light. As they gave up their soul from their dying breath, they sang these words of Ani Ma'amin B'Amunah Shalem V'yas HaMashiach. And so I think it's a duty. I think it's a very good job for us to really understand what these words mean. And what message do they carry? And what promise do they have? There's a lot of depth in these words of Ani Ma'amin B'Amunah Shalem V'yas HaMashiach. I do it full heart. Full, not half a heart, not a quarter, but a full heart. That the Mashiach will come and it will redeem us. So, again, tonight's class is based on some of the literature that the Ramchal wrote of Law. And he starts with something fascinating. The opening line of the book is something fascinating. He quotes a verse from Micha, who prophesies the end of the first temple and, of course, the future Geula, the future redemption. It reads as follows: Al tismachi avoisai. Don't be happy, my enemies. Ki nifalti kimasa, because I fell, but I will stand up again. And from darkness, Hashem will return me back into light. So even though we fell, and even though we were in darkness, yet we are promised by Hashem that we're going to come back and we're going to be redeemed. It's a very fascinating passage. You have to really think about why did the Ramchal decide to use this as the pasuk to start off the entire book. In fact, the entire Mashiach, everything that will happen during the days of Mashiach, really is coded within these words. And before we decipher this pasuk, there's a lot of cool things we can learn from this pasuk. Before we decipher this pasuk, we have to ask ourselves a number of questions. The first question is, why Mashiach? Why do we need Mashiach? Second, what are we being redeemed from? We're about to celebrate Pesach. Pesach is something easy to understand. We were slaves in Egypt. We were persecuted in Egypt, and God redeemed us from Egypt. Brought us out of Egypt and brought us to the land of milk and honey, to the land of Israel. But today, right, even the other exiles, we were exiled to Babylonia. The redemption of that would be leaving Babylonia, going back to Israel. Right? what is the redemption of today's exile? Where are we going to go? Where are we going to end? I mean, is there a place in this world that we have not been persecuted yet? I mean, Israel, we're being persecuted by terrorists. I mean, is there a place that we have not been tortured, not been killed? Where is Mashiach going to take us this time? Where is the redemption? What does it mean that Mashiach will redeem us? To where? To what? The third question we have to ask is, as I'm sure we all know this, and if not, there will be two Mashiachs, right? There will be two Messiahs that will come. The two stages. Chal goes at length, which I'll discuss at other times. It's called Zechir and Pekida, two different times that Mashiach will take role, and each one has its own designated place. So one is referred to the Mashiach ben Yosef, and one is referred to Mashiach ben David. So the question is, why do we need two Mashiachs? What's the reason? Why is it not? Why can't we just one guy good enough? One guy come in and fix the world. I mean, what is with the two Mashiachs? What do we need two Mashiachs? Just obvious questions we can ask ourselves. So again, just to reiterate, to get these questions clear. Number one, why do we need Mashiach? Number two, what are we being redeemed from? Where are we going this time? And finally, why do we need two Mashiachs? One should suffice. So we have to really go back in time. We have to really go back and look back and see, where did the first problem take occur? Where was the first problem? So we all know the first problem started with Adam and Eve. Adam and Eve was the first problem. Adam and Eve ate from the tree of knowledge. They were exiled from, that was the first concept of exile. They're exiled from the Garden of Eden. And God told them not to come back until the world was perfect. That's life began from there. Now, we have to look at that. It's something fascinating. Think about that. I'm assuming that God created man and woman to perfect the world. There was a job. We're starting with a base. We're not trying to prove God here. We're not trying to prove the Torah. We're coming with a base. The base is that there's a purpose in life. This is the fundamental rule in Judaism. There's a purpose in life. So the purpose is to perfect. So what was the commandment of Allah? What was the commandment? Not to eat from the tree. Can I ask you a question? How is it possible to perfect something by not doing something? If the world has deficiencies and our job is to perfect it, then we must do, not do. How can you perfect something by not doing anything? It's a fascinating question. How can Adam perfect the world by refraining from the tree? What type of perfection is that?
We have a say and low say.
So, because of this question, the Ramchal goes into saying that there was a positive in the tree of life and there was a negative in the tree of knowledge. But I want to get something more basic than that. What were you saying?
The world is perfect. Do not spoil it.
Oh, that's the answer. The answer: the world was perfect. Adam was built in the image of God. There's nothing more perfect than that. What Hashem was saying is, don't spoil it. Maintain yourself. Hold it. Guard it. Right? Guard the Garden of Eden. Guard it. Don't spoil it. Maintain it. Your job is not to do. Right? It's a good cure thing, by the way. You tell people, you say, there's no reason for us to have this low self-esteem. Because if you realize with Adam, we're all created in the image of God. You tell a person, what did Adam have to do? Nothing. Must be, it was perfect. And you just have to maintain his perfection, keep the world spinning. That's who we are. We just have to maintain who we are. We see this clearly is by Shavuos, right? What level? Do you know what level we were at when we left Egypt?
49.
Negative.
49.
Right. So it must be that Kabbalistically number 40 is the complete number, and that is the 39 is the worst. It was one level left. So God had to take us out early, right? So what level do you think we have to attain to become perfect? 50. How many days is it between Pesach and Shavuos? 50. Is that right? Is that mathematically correct?
49.
No, is that not, what do you mean? That means I'm at 0. It means when I hit Shavuos, I'm at 0. I just got out of the negative. I need another 50 days. I need altogether 100 days. Not 50 days. It doesn't make sense. If I'm in the negative and I need to get to the positive, I don't need just 50, I need 100. The answer must be, is at 0 we're perfect already. We just be who you are. right? I was teaching a class at NCSY, and a girl asked me, showed me after class, she says, I understand, I did a lot of things, you know, it's funny, like a teenager, she's only lived for like 12 years, 14, 15 years, and she already assumed that she lived the whole life. She said, I think my whole life, I've been doing so many things that, according to the Torah, wasn't up to par. Like, what am I supposed to do? I said, just be who you are. You don't have to change yourself, there's nothing changing. Teshuvah doesn't mean to change, it means to come close, it means to repent, it means to come to Karet, to come close to God. It means define who you are. Just be you, right? It's a good thing to.
Not perfect, huh? I mean, I think this.
Just be you. Just look in the mirror and say, who am I? Who I can really be. Doesn't mean that it's just a good way to speak to someone that don't have a low self-esteem of yourself. You have a lot of kayak. You're an image of God. You have a lot of power, and you can do so much.
Isn't that kind of arrogant speaking?
No, the great. If it was for you to say it, but since the Torah says it, nothing. I walk around proud that I'm Jewish. I don't have to. That's not arrogance. That's pride, right? I once heard of him a big talk show. He's arrogant. Big talk show was Russian. I heard of Russian Limbaugh, big from New York, and so he's a big arrogant. He said the difference in bragging and telling the truth is you have something to back it. You know what I mean? So we Jews have something to back. We've been around for 4,000 years and nothing can destroy us. So we have a lot to back. But getting back into the topic, so Adam's job prior to the sin was not to do, was to refrain. Now, what happened after you sinned? What changed? The world changed. So now what must you do? The challenge is no more not doing. The challenge is to do. Now you must do. You caused a deficiency in the world, so now you got to fill up the hole. You got to now recreate the problem that you started. Not recreate, but fix the problem that you started. You dig a ditch, now fill up the hole. So the contrast, very important to the contrast prior to the sin versus after the sin of Adam is what? Is not doing versus doing. Before the sin is not doing. After the sin is doing. And we see this very clearly. What did God command Adam to do? He said, by the sweat of your brow, you shall eat bread. Prior to that, there was no sweat intended. Everything was given to a silver platter. Just maintain that perfection. But once he caused deficiency, now you got to work hard. You got to perfect the world. You caused the deficiency, now you got to fix where you made a mistake. So again, there are two stages. There's a stage prior to the sin of Adam, which is not doing. That was a challenge. Versus after the sin of Adam, which is doing. The commandment to do. To fulfill the mitzvahs and to perfect the world. So, keep that in mind. We have to now take a lesson. We all know that we all have free will, correct? We all have free will. Now that's a discussion itself. I remember a little over a year ago, my welcoming to Otto was, I came to speak here, I spoke on free will. Right? So, that's a discussion in itself. Well, bottom line is we all have free will. That means all of us, no matter what path we take, we have one or two directions we can take, either path A, the right way, or the wrong way. One or two ways. Anything we live, we always have that challenge between the right and the wrong. That's our bechira, that's our free will. So the question is, what was the challenge of Adam prior to the sin versus Adam after the sin, the challenge of Adam after the sin? What is the distortion? What is the deficiency? What's the challenge? The corruption? What could be negative from not doing? What could that lead to? What could not doing lead to? If I can make you not to do something, what could that lead to? Doing it, right? That's obvious. Adam did something, right? Doing it. Where does that come from? So Chazal tells, the rabbis tell us, it comes from taiva, lust. I want this, I want that. I can't refrain from myself. I can't hold myself back. I can't have my ideals. I can't steadfast. I gotta jump to everything. The problem, the challenge between not doing is taiva, is lust, is running after everything out there. That's the challenge of Adam he had prior to the sin. Now this is a little more harder, this one. Now what is the challenge of Adam after the sin? What could be the distortion, the destruction after the sin? What is the challenge? If the job is to do something, what's the challenge? What? Okay. But that's what, see, that, to me, I was thinking about the not doing, but that in itself is a good thing. Because that's a higher level. But what's another way of distorting something by doing? Answer is aggressiveness, being too aggressive. Pushing people over as you succeed. It means I don't care about anyone else, and I'll push everyone over for my own success. If you're in my way, I'll put you down. Being too aggressive, too much doing, that's a negative to that. So, to these two challenges in life, and the challenge of Adam before the sin, which was not doing, and the challenge to that is taiva's lust of grabbing, versus Adam after the sin, which the challenge is being too aggressive. We have two nations that try to beat us in that game. There's a famous medrash. The medrash tells us that, we all know this famous medrash. The medrash tells us that God went around to all the nations of the world and said, do you want the Torah? And the medrash ends up and says, God said, I went to Yishmael, and Yishmael told me, what does it say? It says, you can't steal. So they said, I can't take the Torah. I can't live by that. Then they went to Esav, and Esav said, what does it say in the Torah? It says, don't murder. I can't accept that. I can't live by that. What's fascinating about this medrash is it starts off saying, I went to all the nations in the world, and it ends up, it just went to Esav and Ishmael. So the answer is, because Esav and Ishmael are the totality of all the nations. They are all the nations. It means once you ask them the question, they say no, everything is included within them. Right? Everything, all the 70 nations are included. In fact, there are really 72 nations. Yishmael and Esav are not counted as the 70. Really, the 70 they come from the Yishmael and Esav. Right? So, Yishmael and Esav symbolize the corruption, the problems of what this world shows us, of what this exile is all about. So let's now go back to Adam and Eve. What was the problem what's the challenge of not doing? Taiva, lust. Who would that be counteract? Who is that counterpart? Yishmael. That's a symbolism of Yishmael. Yishmael is all about the bow and arrow. So wherever I shoot the arrow, that's where I'll fly. No boundaries. In fact, his name was Para Adam, the wild man. If you know diktuk in Hebrew, right? You know diktuk, right? What comes first, the noun or the verb? It should go Adam, Para. Not Para Adam, right? It says, usually in Hebrew you say Adam Chashav, a man is important. The verb goes after the noun. Right. It's right, but in Lashon Kodesh, in the Torah, they call Para Adam, they call Yishmael. First the verb, then the noun, backwards. And the commentators explains because intrinsically, he is wild. It's not that he's a person who happens to act wild. His whole DNA is wild. That is actually the noun. The verb is that he's a human. He actually can act human sometimes. But who he is really wild. He has no boundaries. He will go to the ends of the world to do whatever he wants. He's like what's called a tree in a hurricane. Right? It will sway from one end to the other. No end. He'll go anywhere he wants. There's no structure. That's Yishmael. That was the challenge. That is the exile, the challenge that Adam had to face prior to his sin. And he failed in that. Very much so. Now let's go next. What we said that the challenge of Adam after the sin is what? Is being to aggressiveness, which leads to what's the ultimate aggressiveness? I'm going to push everyone down in front of me. What is that? Murder. I will even murder. I will shed some blood. I will conquer the world. Nothing will stop me. Who is that? That's Esav. Esav is the counterpart towards the stage of Adam after he sinned with the tree of knowledge. So again, to go back and to reorganize our minds, this Yishmael symbolizes the stage prior to the sin, which is Taiva, and Esav symbolizes the challenge of Adam faced after the sin, which is aggressiveness, too much, which leads to murder. So, now obviously, we could start formulating our minds and figuring out there must be that we need two Mashiachs. Why? One to perfect prior to the sin, and one to perfect after the sin. Each one has its own challenge. We need one Mashiach to face Yishmael, and we need one Mashiach to face Esav. Each one has its own distinct challenge. One has to fix the deficiency that Yishmael caused in the world, and we need one Mashiach to face the deficiency that Esav caused in the world. Now let's figure out who's Mashiach. The Tikkunei Zohar says is the source that there's two Mashiachs and who they are. One is Mashiach ben Yosef, and one's Mashiach ben David. Let's start with Mashiach ben Yosef. Find fast about Yosef's life. Yosef's life is all about self-control. He was sold to Egypt, the country that symbolized lust and temptation. But he remained that same righteous person he always was. Now that he was put to the test in Potiphar's home, she tried to do immoral things with him. She did anything. He was a beautiful person. And he even got close. But he ended up running out naked. I will not do that. He held himself back. In fact, even the success to Egypt is through the midah, the attribute of Yosef. When the first 7 years, when Egypt was gaining so much money and grain, instead of splurging into the extra, he put it away. And he had self-control and he said, no, we're not going to take temptation in that. We're going to save it. You wait, patient, because in 7 years from now there's going to be a famine. And then he issued them back. Yosef symbolizes self-control. In fact, his name is his own challenge. What does the word Yosef mean? To add, I want more. But he lived for self-control. So his job is to annihilate Yishmael. In fact, that's what the Mekubalim say. That Yosef will wage war against Yishmael. Wage war against Yishmael. Now let's talk about David. Shech ben David. Fascinating. David was in fact a redhead. You know that? David was a redhead. Who else is a redhead, you know, in the Torah? Esav. Esav shed a lot of blood. So did David. David fought a lot of wars. Right? A lot of wars. A lot of people were killed under his name. Another concept is very fascinating. Is that Esav, we're going to get back to it a little bit later, but Esav is a symbolism of garments. He wore a lot of garments. So Yaakov stole his garments. We know the story in the Torah. We know that David's challenge was when he faced Shalom and he was sleeping. What did he do? He cut his garments. Right? And there's a big distinction between David and Esav. You see, Esav fights wars for an end in itself, to cause havoc, fear in the eyes of people, to put them in the darkness, to put them in the shadow. David doesn't want war. He fought wars in order not to have any wars. He annihilated enemies of the Jewish people. So there should be no war. The state of Israel does not want to fight wars. Nor people don't want to fight wars. They don't want any problems. But we need to put our guns up in order to say, don't mess with us. That's David Melech. David Melech is about being strong and annihilating the sake of God all evil, so there should be no wars. In fact, he's the composer of Tehillim, which is the most beautiful, peaceful thing. Psalms, if you think of something where you want to take the word harmony and peace and a dough flying in the air, what would you compare it to? The one thing in Scripture you compare it to Psalms. That's what David Melech was. He's the person who's going to annihilate Esau. He will fight against Esau. And he will win, God willing, against Esau. Yishmael, in fact, just before we finish with David, the verse tells us fascinating. It says, he was red and beautiful. He was red and beautiful and pleasing and with appearance. He was red. Esau was also Edom, he was red. His nickname was Edomi, red. But the difference is, it ends off being pleasant. David was pleasant. Esau wasn't pleasant, he was just red. And now we have these two Mashiachs that will overcome the distortion and corruption of Yishmael and Esau and perfect the world. Perfect the world from after the sin of Adam, which is Esau, and perfect the world prior to the sin of Adam, which symbolizes Yishmael. Another fascinating thing, we can now look back at the pasuk where the Ramchal started, and we can actually appreciate really what he's saying. And we can actually see from, once we understand this, we can really see what the pasuk truly tells us, and how you can see the entire Mashiach within the verse. Let's overview the verse. The verse says, "Altismichi avaisai." Don't be happy, my enemies. Kinafati, because even though I fell kamasi, I will get up. That's stage one, falling versus getting up. Stage two is, Ki Eisha b'chayshach Hashem arli. Hashem will return me from the darkness into light. Two things, falling, getting up, light, darkness into light. The first time the concept of falling and getting up ever mentioned in the Torah is, you know when? Is by Yishmael. It's when the Malach came to Hagar and says, get up. And the pasuk says, Kumi, get up, arise. Arise, lift up your youth, Yishmael, and grasp your hand upon him, for I will make him a great nation. Get up. Furthermore, in Psalms, the first capital, the first paragraph, we recite, and therefore the wicked won't stand up, they won't stand up for judgment. Rishon says something fascinating. Writes something fascinating. It says, therefore the lawless shall not stand up in judgment, because the lawless seek neither inner or outer support from God's moral law, but instead allow themselves to be swayed only to the passions and temptation. They will be unable to rise up and stand up in divine judgment. They have no base. They're like Yishmael. They sway. They just run. It's wherever the arrow goes. They're lawless. They have no structure. That's the first part. The first part is, we will get up. You, Yishmael, you won't be able to get up at the end of the day. Maybe in the beginning you got up and you became a great nation. But at the end of the days you will not succeed. You will stay low. You won't succeed. But we will get up. Because we have something to strive for. We have a Torah. We have a base. And the pasuk ends off and says, Ki Eisha b'chayshach Hashem arli, and I'll return from light to darkness. The Medrash tells us that Edom, Rome, is a symbolism of darkness. Because it's through the years of Edom, which through the wars and the crusades and the pogroms and the Holocaust, that they shed darkness upon the world. It was the Dark Ages. Chazal refer to them as the Dark Ages. It doesn't come from the 1300s. It comes way before that. And what Hashem's saying is that we're going to have a second Mashiach. It is going to come and to return that darkness back into light. And it's going to annihilate Esau. Similarly, when we bring in the Shabbos, we sing the Chadodi, we say, it's not enough rakumi, lishve bigi sefar techami. Arise, get up, shake off the ashes from your clothing, and put on this beautiful clothing, the clothing of splendor. Again, the first verse is also referring to Mashiach. The first part of the verse refers to what? It refers to Mashiach ben Yosef fighting against the Shmuel, arising, getting up, showing structure, not falling to temptation. And the latter refers to putting on clothing. It refers to Edom. Esau, like we mentioned, is all about clothing. Yaakov steals Esau's clothing. Clothing comes from where? Comes from this stage after the sin. It's when they were embarrassed, and God created them clothing. That's the source of clothing. The word levusha, clothing, means what? Busha. Embarrassment. They were embarrassed. The word beged, clothing, also means begad, means to rebel. They rebelled against God. The similar ways of his rebellion is fighting wars, to aggressiveness. And yet, what we say in the Chadodi is get up, or stand. You're going to succeed against Ishmael, and you're also going to succeed against Esav, because just like Yaakov was able to put on the clothing of Esav and make it smell as the smell of Gan Eden, so too, you will be able to put on the clothing and succeed against Esav and put on the clothing of Gan Eden. But you know something? You mentioned about today. And today you see something fascinating. Today, it seems that everything's switched. Today, Esav is not about bloodshed. Esav became a country of temptation. Edom is Christianity. The world of America is the world of temptation. And then Yishmael became the nation of bloodshed. It's fascinating. You see the exact opposite of today. Today, you find Yishmael wasn't bloodshed. And Esau is all about lust and temptation. And anything new that comes out, I want it now. It's fascinating. You know, when I was just on this NCSY trip, and it was all about the whole week was all about Holocaust. And they showed a video about a family that was butchered in Eretz Yisrael. That only 2 children survived. I mean, a few years ago. The father, the mother, and the 4 children. Three of the four children. It's horrific. I mean, these kids never saw something. We showed them this video, made them all cry. Right. I mean, this is what happens. I was telling them, this is not nothing new. This happens every day. You just don't hear about it because it's not news anymore. It's a common thing. So Yishmael became the bloodshed. And the answer is, because no, there's still bloodshed in America, right? Murders happen every day. There's no peace. And Yishmael is still a bunch of lustful people. They want every inch of our country. They want to steal anything. They're a bunch of guys. The difference is they mix in together. So somehow reunite. I came across a letter from Rabbi Chaim Vital. He writes as follows. He writes that during the days of Mashiach, Yishmael will come together with Esau. And Esau will come together with Yishmael. Yishmael will integrate through the countries of Esau. And Esau will integrate with the countries of Yishmael. And you don't find ever in history like it's going on today. Where the entire Europe is all Arabs. The entire Middle East is all a bunch of Esau's going there and practicing their beliefs in Yerushalayim. But it's all united. You know what's fascinating? It's mind-boggling.
So what stage is it in now?
Well, we'll all find out. It's hopefully
They're all saying the footsteps of the Mashiach.
we'll have time to know.
Amen. So the key question, what we have to do in all this machine.
So let me end off. Well, that's have to come to my class after Pesach. You really want to, this is just an introduction. But I'd like to end off with a story and a blessing from the Talmud. The end of tractate Makos is as follows. And I would like to read you the story. The story says like this. Once Rabbi Gamliel, Rabbi Elazar ben Aryeh, Rabbi Yeshua, Rabbi Akiva were traveling up to Jerusalem after the destruction of the temple. When they reached Mount Tzifon, they ripped their garments. And when they came to the Temple Mount, they saw a fox emerging from the Holy of Holies. And they started to weep. But Rabbi Akiva was laughing. They said to him, "For what reason are you laughing?" He replied, "For what reason are you crying?" They said to him, "A place which it's written, a non-colon approach shall die, and now foxes prowl over it. Should we not weep?" Rabbi Akiva responded, "For this very reason I'm laughing. For it is written, I will summon trustworthy witnesses for myself, Uri the Kohen and Zechariah ben Yivarchayahu." Now what connection does Uri have with Zechariah? Uri prophesies during the era of the first temple, whereas Zechariah prophesies during the second temple. Rather, by mentioning the two prophets together, the scripture made the prophecy of Zechariah dependent upon the prophecy of Uriah. In the prophecy of Uriah, it's written, therefore, because of you, Zion will be plowed over like the field. In the prophecy of Zechariah, it's written, old men and old women will once again sit in the streets of Jerusalem. Rabbi Akiva concludes, as long as the prophecy of Uriah has not been fulfilled, I fear that the prophecy of Zechariah will not be fulfilled. But now that the prophecy of Uriah has been fulfilled, for the Temple Mount is totally desolate, now it is certain that the prophecy of Zechariah will be fulfilled. And the other rabbis responded to Akiva, Akiva, you have comforted us. Akiva, you have comforted us. The Jewish people lived and survived through the prophecy of Uriah. We have experienced crusade and pogroms. We have walked the death marches and heard the screams of the death camps. But we survived. We survived with the words of Ani Mam on our lips. We have sang these songs, Ani Mam ve'emunah shalem ve'vias HaMashiach af al pi she'yisrael kozeh chakla v'choyim shavah. I will believe that Mashiach will come any day. And God willing, we will sing as the prophecy of Zechariah becomes reality. Like it says in the Gada, apropos to happening soon, therefore we are obligated to give thanks and praise to His mighty acts, to allow, to glorify, to exalt, to proclaim His mighty, bless, exalt, and celebrate Him who brought us from slavery to freedom, from sorrow to joy, from mourning to festivity, from darkness into great light, from subjugation to redemption. Let us therefore recite before Him a new song, Halukkah. God willing, Yirtz Hashem b'mei remain, we should experience the Nevuah of Zechariah and once again sing at the gates of Yerushalayim.
Amen. Good.